Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's first live show where we're talking about the WTRL ZRL. Oh, we need to turn that off. There we go. Hopefully that has addressed that issue. But yes, as I was saying, good evening, everybody. It looks like we've got some viewers in the house as well. And I am joined...
Can't hear you, Si.
Oh, I thought that might happen. It helps if I unmute myself with you, Paul. But yes, good evening, everybody. The first technical problems. It's a live show. It wouldn't be right if we didn't have some technical issues. But Paul, hopefully you can hear me now.
I can. Good evening. Good to see you again.
And I can introduce you to everybody. So everybody, this is Paul Fitzpatrick. For those who don't know, he is the Zwift DS. Paul is an expert DS. He's also an expert at team time trialing on Zwift. So I think it's really important tonight as we're on Season 4, Stage 1, and we're opening up on a team time trial to get Paul in to have a quick chat for the newbies and maybe for some more experienced out there about all things team time trialing. But I just want to give a bit of insight of what we're going to do tonight and how it's going to go. Tonight's show is going to be a little bit different than the regular shows, as I said, because it is Season 1. We are starting off on a team time trial. And I think the rest of the courses where we're looking at points races, we'll be looking at the course in a lot more detail and tactically where you can get those points as a team, who's going to go for the climbs, the sprints, and so on. But tonight, yes, we're going to cover the course, which is reasonably important, of course, for a team time trial. But more importantly, we're going to be focused on the tactics of team time trialing. What numbers we should be looking at, what you should be looking at when you're starting, when you're in your pace line, when, if at all, you should be dropping riders, and looking at all the detail that, Paul, hopefully you are going to help us to understand this evening. And of course, we'll have a quick look at the bike choice as well. I know you've prepared plenty of data for us, Paul, as well, and some interesting stats, so we'll work through those at the same time. But first of all, I just want to give a quick heads up. Now, we are going to flash up some video of the course, of course, and we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail. If it is that you want to view the whole course, I've just put up a time-lapse video of the waistband route. So if you go to my YouTube channel later on, not during the live show, of course, you'll find a 6-minute video of the whole course, so you can go and find that. I've also left a link in the description below of Paul's course notes, which is very kindly done for us today. Now, I do want to give a shout out as well to Electric Spirit. Paul, I do apologise because I'm just going to cover your face for 1 second. But essentially, what we should be looking at is the schedule. Electric Spirit are essentially going to be putting on these Recon rides every Saturday, the Saturday before the Tuesday's course. They're going to be a slightly shortened version in some cases because I'm not sure everybody wants to be doing 6 laps of a particular course 3 days before the ZRL itself. So it's well worth checking out. I know you can find that on the Facebook pages of Electric Spirit as well. But Paul, let's get straight in and have a look at the course in a bit more detail. So this is the start. We're on the waistband, 27.9 kilometers. Paul, do you want to talk us through the course and any technical areas that we should be looking at?
Yeah. So, as you say, waistband's probably one of the flattest courses. It's in a way that's worse because it's brutal. There's no respite at all. It's just hard all the way around. But the first 10K, completely flat through the desert. All done it lots of times. The first incline comes at about 9.5, 10 kilometers in as you go out of Saddle Springs, and it's the only sustained climb, I would say, of the course. It's about 900 meters, 2-3. I think it maybe touches at 4%, and it's the place where, and we'll talk on this later, that where the one place where you need to really kind of have a maintained plan for how you're going to get up that and stay together. It's a bit early to be losing people. So that's the first and only real proper climb on the course, I'd say.
Yeah, 900 meters, and it comes at 9.5 kilometers, right? And I remember there's sort of two signs that come up on the road, and then as you go past the second time, that's when you go left and sort of hit those rolling roads towards the villas as well, right?
Yes, yeah. So you actually go down into the tunnels at that point. And there's a little incline kick out of the tunnel, This is a comment saying that my volume's a bit low, so
Yeah, I've
hopefully
just
people
turned
can
it
hear
up
me
actually.
okay.
So yeah, thank you very much, Rob. I've just turned it up.
So yes, you kick out of the tunnels, and that's fine. Yeah, people have done that before. False flat past the villas, and then down the gravel hairpins, and heading off out towards the volcano.
That's it. And then when we get to the volcano, we've got that. Well, we're going to have that sharp right turn, right, where we've got that short 5% kicker, which I use to my advantage on a points race, but on a team time trial, everyone's got to be kicking at the same time, I guess, when we get to that point.
Yeah, it's the one of the places as you approach it, and it seems to drag on always a bit longer than I think it's going to when I've done this course before. But before you hit that right turn, or as you hit that right turn, you all need to be standing and pushing. So, as you say, in a solo race, you might use that to try and break away from your opponents. In this, you all want to break together effectively, because you make up more time on the slow sections of courses, and it's also where teams get broke apart. So I would suggest you need to be standing as you hit the right, and you push all the way around the next bend, which is a left 180, and then it climbs up gently, and then there's a little kick over a right bend, and then you're down over the crest.
So I guess
that's the main bit.
So I guess the thing to consider there is, obviously, Zwift, in team time trialing in particular, is all about momentum there. So I guess the person on the front, as we're coming into that kicker, has got to be wary that as soon as we turn that bend, everyone's going to be kicking. So you've got to keep enough in the tank that everyone kicks together. It's not one of those climbs where you can all ease off and make sure you all get up. You've all got to kick up because you need that momentum to maintain the speed, right?
Yeah, you need. Hopefully, if you time it right, somebody's always going to be coming off the front as you hit it. So you want to try and hope maybe, if you are at that level of planning and detail, that one of your strongest of your team of 6 is at the front as you hit it, because they might be able to push all the way through, rather than doing a turn, dropping to the back, and then realizing that everybody else has kicked on.
Yeah. I think it is worth saying, thank you, Rob, for just pointing out on the guest volume. But if anyone does have any questions or comments through the video, then just please post them in the chat. Myself and Paul will try and get to those as we can as well. I know Paul can see the chat at the same time. So we will get to these particular points on the video. But once we've gone through that kicker through the volcano, we then head back down to downtown, which is still pretty rolling, I think. And then we are pretty rolling until we head back to the desert, which is kilometer 24. I can't remember. 24, right? Or
yeah, something like that. So you're probably about 3-4k out. You go past the athletics track, I think, and then there's a left turn, and there's a gravel, and then a boardwalk. And people on the back just need to be careful there, because the draft is less effective as you hit the change of surface. So those riders at that might just need to push a bit more wattage just to stay in the draft and stay in the line. And then really the next point is you go past the start-finish pens, and you're 2.5k from home, and you really need to be kind of winding things up. I would suggest you shorten the turns and you increase the power. You push anybody that's still feeling strong to the front. Consider that suicide pull that we've talked about before, where somebody absolutely hammers themselves with a K to go, as long as you've got the 4 left to cross the line.
Yeah. So
and then the big sprint to the finish.
How often, when you're DSing with these sort of pro teams, I know you do a lot with the I think it's the Socks for Watts female teams. How often are you sort of really pushing this suicide pull? Is it something you're deploying every time, or?
I actually see how much difference it really makes at the time. Is debatable. By then it's seconds barely, but actually I find by then it's more of a motivational thing. We're nearly there, go, and with 500 meters to go, I just tell everybody to race each other, and everybody feels like they've absolutely given everything. If in the last K, they're swearing at me and telling me how brutal it was and awful, because usually that'll be followed by that was amazing right at the end.
Yeah. All right. So I think all in all, it's a flat course. Be wary on that first climb at 9.5, punch up there. And then this climb, the rolling sections, then we've got this climb up the volcano. Everyone's got to be punching up there, maintain that. In terms of bike choice, I think it's fairly straightforward for this. It's just got to be as aero as possible. So I think if you've got the Tron, you go for the Tron bike and the aero wheels. If you're unsure about any of that, then go and see the Zwift Insider. But I guess when we say aero as possible, there is a caveat with that, right, Paul? For any newbies out there.
Yes. No TT bikes.
No TT bike. So anyone who's out there who's not aware, and this is your first team time trial within Zwift, do not get yourself a time trial bike for the team time trial because you will have no draft. So we've done the course. I think the course is less important, as I've said, in the team time trial. Yes, you do need to be wary of those particular points. But I think for me, in my experience with team time trialing, the most important thing is each rider knowing their role and knowing their numbers and knowing what they can do in terms of time. So I really want to jump onto that. But I know at the same time, Paul, you've got some really interesting information in terms of the world records on this course.
Yes. So these are the fastest times on this course. Now, these are WTRL records rather than ZRL. Difference mainly being there are 8 riders normally instead of 6. And frankly, WTRL keep much better it's easy to find the record times within WTRL that's going on every week. And a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about shortly is based off these fastest times. But yeah, so on this course, I think this was February. You can see 34 minutes for PO Auto and 37 minutes for Sox Watts WRT. And they're averaging, you can see what they're averaging, 5 up to kilo for the men, 4.7 for the women. But more importantly, I know.
I mean, you say they're averaging that. What are they doing on the front?
Yeah, exactly that. They're doing 130, 140, or even 150% for 30 to 60 seconds on the front. And if you look at any of their power files after on Zwift Companion, it's a sawtooth. That's the important bit. It's all about momentum. So in the PO Auto case, they had 8 starters and they finished with 5. Sox for Watts started with 7, finished with 6. But yes, the men are doing 500 plus watts on the front, and the women are easily doing 350.
Right. So that's the pros. But what I guess with the next question is, what about us mere mortals? You know, when and you shared this with me earlier this week as well. And at first look, I thought this is complicated, but actually once I got my head around it, after about 10 seconds, I thought, really straightforward and really simple. Do you want to give us a bit of background about this particular document?
Yeah, so people that have spotted me on social media will have seen that I regularly post the recce notes that we've talked about, but I also plug a time predictor, so a power planner and a time predictor, which we're going to come on to. And effectively, it takes the best times and say, if these people are this physiology and they're doing this much power, if we're this physiology and we're doing X amount less power, how fast will we go? And you can plug in some numbers and it spits out a reasonably accurate time for what you'll end up doing. And I realized that I could actually plug those numbers in for you for the teams and boil it down to a lookup chart. So the URL's there on the screen. This is just the top half of the screen.
Yes.
But if you, as an example, if you're a team of 6 and your average weight, and this is the men's team on this particular chart, but there is a women's tab as well. And the reason being that I find that the accuracy is better if I compare women's teams to women's times and men's to men's, because of the weight difference and the
height difference as well, right?
Yeah. So on this example, I know you're about 67 kilos. So if you had 6 of you, all as a team, your average weight would be about 67. So you look at kind of 67 on the top row there, the pink row. If you scroll down, and if you all did an average of 4 watts per kilo, so what's that? 6 plus 24, it's about 250 watts, 260 watts, something like that. With those peaks at 130% up front, 125% on the front, 6 of you doing in that in rotation, you're going to do just shy of 39 minutes for waistband to within seconds. Slight sort of adjustments for height, and if you lose a rider, if you only start with 5, I'm pretty confident you'll be 12 seconds slower, even if you did everything else the same. If you're an 87 kilo average team, so 10 columns along, and you go down to 4 watts a kilo, you can see they're doing close on 4 minutes faster.
Yeah, wow. Weight is so critical.
Yeah, because its power is so critical. So that, think of it as raw power. That 87 team times 4 are doing 350 watts average. You're doing 260 watts average.
Yeah.
You can't, on a flat course, you can't beat raw power.
Yeah.
So this table will pretty much tell anybody what's our average weight of our team and what kind of power do we produce when we are doing a team time trial, or what have we done in the past when we've practiced.
Yeah.
And this will give you a time for you. And it shows that not everybody's A, B, and C's are the same.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, all I'm getting from this is if I want to get better at team time trial, I need to get in the squat rack, put some weight on, and improve my raw power, essentially, which coincidentally does bring me slightly onto the sponsor of tonight's show, which is WKG. I am wearing their T-shirt tonight, but these guys this is their point, actually. They're going to fit me out with some strength and conditioning equipment for over the winter, because a lot of the Zwift races are now finishing in sprints, and team time trialing is something I need to get my head around a bit more, and I think the way to do it is to do that. So I think this is great in terms of predicting the time. So we just put in our average weight, our average power of the team, and we should be able to really accurately predict our time. And I guess I also want to jump onto the document that you introduced me to last season, middle of last season actually, which really changed our team's tactic. And for me, if any listeners and watchers out there, this is probably the most critical thing that changed our team time trial last season. Was each rider I filled out this document and put each rider's information in there in terms of we don't enter weight, we just enter the FTP, right, or their maximum 20-minute power, and their maximum and their height. That was it.
So watts per kilo, raw watts, and height.
Yeah, fantastic. And then I've got my little document here which tells me what my power should be on the front, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth wheel, and I just got to follow my numbers. And I think I know I said this at the end of last season, but we went from doing, I think we were sort of like 18th in the division on Team Time Trial 1, where we were just doing it how we'd done it before, and then we utilised your document here, all having our numbers planned out, and we moved up. Well, we were third at one point, I have told you this before, and I think we finished fifth or sixth in the end, but it also felt much smoother and much more in control, and there was less waiting around because everyone just knew what numbers they got to do in each position. It is worth pointing out to everybody who is watching today, again, there's a link to these documents down below. So although they look a little bit complicated on the screen, maybe, I thought that the first time I saw it, but that's because sometimes I don't fully get these technical things. That's why I rely on people like Paul and expertise and your nerdiness, if I can, Paul, to help people like me through this. But if you follow the link, it is really self-explanatory to put those information in. The back end, the magic in the back end that you've designed does the rest for you, and you end up with this simple numbers that you should be doing right when you're on the front, right to your last man.
Yeah, so there's a web version of this on my Zwift DS website that you can plug in all the numbers, and it will pop out your predicted time, and it will then give you a visual version of this. But this is more accurate still and more detailed, because this gives you the position and power for every single rider. So as you say, on here, I've just called riders A to F, and I've put their weight in brackets just for illustration purposes, but you don't actually need to fill that in. And that's a typical B team, 3.5 watts a kilo, high 200s FTPs, male team of kind of average height. But what this is doing is saying, and you can see there it says scaling factor in the middle of the screen.
Yeah.
You need to be doing 130% of FTP on the front to keep the momentum of a time trial team. So if you do that, what is everybody's first position power? And that's what that wattage by position is on the first column of the lower half of that screen. But then taking into account the Zwift draft, it gives you position 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
And that number is flexed slightly by the weight and height of that particular individual. And then the last colourful section shows you the percentage above their FTP. And typically they're all doing somewhere around 120 to 140%. And so obviously different riders are different.
Well, not really, because I can see someone's getting an easy ride there at 117, I think.
So rider D at 73 kilos is one of the lightest and one of the most powerful. So when you take the team average, they're better off versus somebody else. But if you look down at the bottom section, you've got watts per kilo and turn for the front. And the turn is based on intervals of power. How long should somebody stay on the front to make it repeatable and continuous? So you can see rider A only has to do 15-second turns. Rider D, who's got an easy ride, actually is going to be doing 40-second turns because they're capable of doing it.
Yeah. So is your document calculating these turn times?
Yes.
Right. Is that
based on?
I don't remember that turn time last time.
I think it was there. It's based on some percentages and some fairly kind of standard thinking around interval training on some of the well-known online training platforms, where the higher above your FTP you are, the shorter time you need to be doing it for.
Yeah. All right, that all makes sense.
What you're trying to do is you're trying to keep all of the team members contributing in a way that doesn't kill any of them.
Sustainable, yes, of course.
But a sustained momentum.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just to say, if you guys can hear any music in the background here, of all nights tonight, the next door neighbours have decided to have a 30th garden party with a jacuzzi. So I'm just getting music and girls drinking champagne that I can hear over this side. So hope you guys can't hear that too. But it's what happens when you're live sometimes, and in your studios, you've got neighbours. But the other thing I asked you, Paul, was your top 3 tips for team time running on Zwift. So gladly, if you will, take us through your top 3 tips, you being the Zwift DS Team Time Trial expert.
Yeah, so, there's loads of videos out there. I've done them, you've done them. All kinds of people have done videos on how to do a team time trial, all of the things. But if you said, what are the 3 most important things for a new team, maybe at least, who's never done one of these before, and it all sounds very complicated, is just have a plan. Any plan is better than no plan. So understand the course, we've been through it, know where things might get tricky. This is a fairly straightforward course, but it's one of the more easier ones to get used to. Work out how you're going to start. That's always an amazing thing. Some people will sit on a pairing screen and blast out. Others will all take off and somebody's forgotten to start, or somebody's pedals don't connect, or whatever. Just have a plan. My view is, if you all go out at a reasonable position 1 power, so in that instance, just under FTP, and make sure you're together, that's better than everybody blasting off and then slowing down and regrouping. And if all this paceline stuff sounds complicated and you're of a similar physiology, race in a blob. It's fine as long as you agree roughly what you're all going to do in terms of power output, and raw power is probably better than watts per kilo, I think, on a flat course. So that you'll have a rough idea of your effort level, and also, crucially, know what you're going to do if there's a problem. Yeah. And the problem usually is somebody getting dropped. Yeah. And we can kind of touch on that.
Okay, let's have, I noticed your document said that if you drop a light or you're down to 5, basically you're losing 12 seconds. So technically, if we're halfway through a course, again, I'm simplifying things, I have to for me, but if we're halfway through a course and we drop a ride, does that mean potentially we're losing 6 seconds? Or, at what point would you think?
At worst,
yeah. So, I mean, I would spend longer than that waiting for someone,
We've had
I guess.
This conversation before. Yeah, we've had this conversation before, because it is quite contentious, but all the maths that I've seen suggests that losing somebody doesn't make a massive difference to time. And more than happy for somebody to prove me wrong, but that's what I've seen. So yes, if you reach the volcano and somebody blows up, I wouldn't wait. I mean, you're 2/3 of the way round.
Yeah.
If the other 5 of you can still be going at the same turns, it isn't worth waiting, unfortunately. Yeah. It's brutal, but it isn't worth waiting. So that I kind of comes on to the second thing is have a better plan. And by a better plan, I mean, are you going to race in a pace line? Are you going to use a document? Are you going to understand the draft and learn to use that kind of sink and sprint, or the gentle drift back through the pack? All these little methodologies. And are you going to be, can you be flexible and fluid? So, if momentum takes somebody to the front, then kind of let them do their turn.
Just allow that happen, right?
Allow that to happen. So that's where you start to get a bit more nuanced, I think.
Yeah.
And then the final most important thing is communicate and be decisive. So being dropped is a good one. The worst thing, and probably where a DS is most useful for a team, is there's somebody who can cold-heartedly go, "We're going," or "We need to wait for Bob because Bob's powerful on the flat and he's only 2 seconds off," or who's gonna do a longer pull, because otherwise you all end up waiting for each other.
So we're all too polite. We're all too polite to drop whoever it might be, right?
Yeah, and nobody, everybody's on the limit and gasping for air, and you don't want to be making decisions at the same time. So communicate if you've got a problem. If you can't do a turn, then say so, and you go, "I'm only going to do 20-second turns," or "Can I skip a turn?" And somebody else will go, "I can push on." Otherwise, you end up second guessing each other.
Yeah. I think that's always been one of the things we've tried to figure out as a team is that I know there are areas on the course where, naturally some riders are going to drift to the front and vice versa on the climbs or the descents. But even on the flat sections, I remember going around London a few times when, the communication is not quite there and someone just said, "Oh, I feel strong, I'll get on the front." And you sort of lose that positioning that you've had for the first half of the race. I guess that just highlights the importance of having a DS. So those things happen. But then, I've had the role where I've been trying to communicate those things at the same time of ride, and you just, you end up with seeing two people pushing at 5.5 watts a kilo off the front, and you're like, before you know it, you've just blown 2 out. So
yeah, and that's where the pace line kind of comes in. Is that as long as everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing in what position at what time, then you kind of end up with a pace line, because you're not trying to be a pace line, you're trying to do what you're supposed to do. And if everybody else is doing what they're supposed to do at the same time, you end up with a pace line.
Yeah. I think on that point, like I say, there's lots of videos out there talking about the changes and pace lines, blobbing up versus pace lines and so on. I say we've done it in the past, but when it comes to those changes, I'm a fan of the sink and sprint. Having said that, with a caveat, I know with these new pack dynamics, and I had this chat with the other day, I actually think it's less relevant now, because I do think there's a less stickiness. If you're the second rider trying to get on the front, I think it's easier to get round now. You don't need that same differential in power that you had before this recent change. But I guess we'll find out this time as we get to stage one.
I think very quickly for the newer team time rider, sink and sprint is where you effectively you do your turn that we've talked about, and then you basically stop pedaling and you drift quickly to the back, and then as you pass the last rider coming past you, you sprint. It's a great way of doing it. Lots of people do it. I think if you're new and you're not used to it, it's probably worth just dropping to 50% of your effort level, 40% of your effort level, but keep going, and you will drift to the back.
Yeah,
it's a risky maneuver if you've not practiced it, and you end up getting. And once you're off a second or two, your night might be over.
Yeah, it absolutely takes some practice for that sink and sprint, for sure. So, Paul, thank you very much for this evening. Really appreciate your insights into the maths, the numbers, understanding the draft within Zwift, and how to utilize that for some world record times, as it were, with when it comes to team time trial. So really appreciate that. Are you going to be DSing for anyone this season in season 4? I know you do a lot on Thursday nights.
Yeah, I feel a little bit of a fraud with the Zwift DS Swift. I haven't done that much over the summer, to be fair. So not at the moment, but who knows? Let's say I know I promised you and your team a DS
might be why
DS session, but you guys know what you're doing. So how about if if there's anybody in the chat who watches this video now or later who's maybe a new team, who's doing the London or kind of Central Europe time zone and thinks that this is all a bit new, and drop a message in the chat and maybe
Oh,
maybe I'll pop up with my spreadsheet for them.
right. So you're skipping the DS you promised me, but you're offering your DS services to one of the other ZRL teams, I guess. I'm fine with that as long as it's not someone in my division and we end up riding against the team you're DSing. I'm fine. So if anyone fancies having Paul as DS and you're in a decent time zone that he's not waking up too early or too late, then it sounds like Paul's offering his services. Drop a comment in the chat, and then myself thought, I'll introduce you to Paul, and you can take it from there and see if you can work someone out. So thank you very much, Paul. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. Like I say, this video is going to go up after the show, so if you guys just wouldn't mind popping down, giving it a thumbs up, giving it a share, that really appreciate it. Really helps the channel out. Thank you very much. Like I say, next week's show will be a little bit different. It's going to be about half the length. It's going to be about 15 minutes because we haven't got to go through all the team time trialing nuances and tactics and so on. We're purely going to be looking at it from a tactical point of view of gathering the points for your team at that particular point. So have a great evening. Have a great weekend, guys, and we will see you guys soon on the roads of Zwift.